us in making this conference possible.
So this is a critical moment for lower income countries in the global governance of taxation. It's exactly 100 years, as it happens, since a group of experts commissioned by the League of Nations produced a report that laid the foundations for how we tax businesses and people who make money across borders. For most of the time since that report was published, it's been the OECD that's been the guardian of the most widely accepted international tax standards. Its Model Tax Convention, which underpins bilateral agreements, transfer pricing guidelines for multinational enterprises, and standards for a tax information exchange. Lower-income countries in Africa and elsewhere have made their best efforts to follow those standards, given the capacity constraints that they face. Kenya is a prime example. Kenya has played a leading role in the implementation of transfer pricing rules on the continent, the work on base erosion and profit shifting, and on tax information exchange. Significant tax revenue has been clawed back by our colleagues at KRA from multinational enterprises as a result. Yet, we also know that OECD tax standards present two significant problems for lower-income countries. First, they're complex, creating significant hurdles to tax enforcement where much simpler approaches would be possible. This is not just a problem for low and middle-income countries, but it's a greater constraint on countries with less capacity in their revenue authorities. Second, OECD standards contain within them an inbuilt bias towards countries that are rich in capital and intangible assets. This bias works against countries that primarily import capital and services, including digital services. Adopting them means consistency with the rest of the world, which is a good thing, but it costs tax revenue that such countries can ill afford given current fiscal pressures. If, as I wrote last week on the ICTD website, there's no prospect of a global consensus about reform to international tax standards that is deep, universal, and strong, we should entertain the possibility that the most active standard-setting bodies in the future will be at regional level, and Africa is leading the way in that regard. Our conference will discuss income taxes on businesses and individuals. We'll consider minimum taxes, taxes on wealth, carbon taxes, taxes on digital payments, among other things. We'll look at the past, what we can learn from experiences to date, the present, how countries can navigate the opportunities and choices available to them at this moment, and the future, what further reforms will be desirable. And we will do that on two levels. First, the content of international standards and of alternative approaches. Second, the structures and processes through which countries make their policy and cooperate with each other. I cannot think of a better place to do that than Kenya. We're joined this week by local experts from government, the private sector, and civil society to complement our international participants.
The conference offers an important platform to discuss emerging issues in international taxation, and especially in the context of developing countries. Distinguished participants, Kenya has made significant progress in international taxation, and as a signatory to many international tax treaties and agreements. For instance, the Treaty and International Policy Office at KRA manages international tax matters that include double taxation agreements, mutual agreement procedures, as a map, the legislative review and implementation of the OECD and G20 base, erosion and profit shifting agenda recommendations domestically. Further, Kenya participates in international taxation forums organized by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, the United Nations, Africa Tax Administration Forum, and the East Africa Revenue Authority Technical Committee, among others, and has hitherto contributed to the development of international tax policy. In the year 2023, the country acceded to the two-pillar solution on digital taxation as spearheaded by the OECD and inclusive framework. Despite the progress made so far, Kenya, like many developing countries, is faced with a myriad of challenges related to international taxation. As you are aware, globalization has brought increased capital flows, both in foreign direct investment and portfolio investments, which would be expected to increase tax revenue for developing countries. However, this aspect brings with it various administrative challenges. The structure of international treaties, for instance, makes no provisions for e-commerce. In addition, countries experience abuse of tax treaties due to inadequate beneficial ownership anti-provisions, at times leading to treaty shopping. Further, taxation of digital economy remains relatively new and challenging, especially with regard to the definition of value in digital business. As we address the issues related to intangible assets that underpin this industry. There is also insufficient information about worldwide activities and operations of multinational enterprises, and finding comparable data for cases related to transfer pricing. Other challenges relate to insufficient expertise in international taxation matters for many developing countries. In view of the foregoing, ladies and gentlemen, this conference provides an opportune platform for developing convergence of mind among the international taxation researchers, policymakers, tax administrators, development partners, and academia to debate and offer solutions on the challenges that I have outlined, among others. I encourage you to interrogate the thematic areas frankly and boldly, with a view to finding solutions that could inform tax policies for developing countries.